So just watch for yourself. The mainstream media appearing to fail to press Dr. Anthony Fauci on a new big report, bombshell report, that says the Wuhan laboratory in China actually did use U.S. money to fund controversial research where scientists manipulate viruses, often making them more transmissible. Dr. Fauci has gone on the record in the past insisting the United States did not fund that type of research. Yesterday, a CNN anchor sat down with Fauci for nearly 10 minutes after the report was released. Did not even ask him once about it. Instead, they talked about whether large crowds should be allowed inside football stadiums this fall.
When you look at crowds like that, you approve of that? Or is that just not smart?
No, I don't think it's smart. I think when you're dealing particularly outdoors is always better than indoors. But even when you have such a congregate setting of people close together, first you should be vaccinated. And when you do have congregate settings, particularly indoors, you should be wearing a mask.
Now, I'm a girl who loves some fruit, low-hanging or otherwise. Apparently, lots of low-hanging fruit there because, just ask about this picture.
Just ask about this picture. Here's what I can't get over also is that the journalists, the media, that's supposed to represent ordinary Americans. I keep coming back to that today. Who is representing all of the questions that Americans have? Who is going to hold that man accountable for his statements and the fact that policy flows from this authority that he has essentially granted himself that affects every American? And meanwhile, to those stadiums, look, I love a good football game. You know it. And
well, look at the U.S. Open.
Decision.
It was packed. I didn't hear him talking about that.
Exactly. And that should be a local decision. So, for example, my home stadium, the Huskies, the best team in the world, they have there. All you have to do, you show your vaccination card or you show a proof of a negative test, right? Yeah. Masks are a different story. It's a different issue at this moment. But the whole point is that they set what's best for them, and they set a way to have those fans enjoy the civic life that we are all a part of, and the social life and the culture and community, without ostracizing them, coming from this one man who continues to be given a pass on fundamental issues, including the origination of this virus and what this administration, what he knew about it.
So I always believe that comeuppance, Southern word, it gets you in the end. So it's coming. Why lie about this? Why not just say what the truth is and say, I don't know, fog of war. I'm sure they can come up with something. But, be honest about it. China's not going to let us look at their records now, if there are any to even see anymore, if they haven't destroyed everything.
No, and he can't be truthful because the truth would mean that very likely, if this did originate in the lab, U.S. taxpayer dollars helped to fund a pandemic that was unleashed upon the world out of a lab in Wuhan, China. What is so galling to me is when you read these 900 pages of documents that were obtained by The Intercept, the grant request actually acknowledges the dangers of this research. So Dr. Fauci, I presume he read the application for the grant, which said the grant proposal acknowledges some of these dangers. Fieldwork involves the highest risk of exposure to SARS or other COVIDs while working in caves with high bat density overhead and potential fecal dust to be inhaled. So presumably he read this, and presumably he greenlighted the funding and now lying about it to Congress. But Senator Rand Paul's been on this from the beginning. I hope he continues to.
Vivek, I look at this also a slightly different way. Was it just a lie? Or was it people are too busy? They're not smart enough to figure this out. I will say it this way and make it really, really simple. We didn't pay for the pandemic.
Yeah, well, look, I think that it is really important to see with clear eyes what the likely source of this pandemic was. All right, the U.S. had a ban on gain-of-function research. Rogue scientists disagreed with that decision. Anthony Fauci is on the record disagreeing with that decision, decides through the back door to use private parties to fund it abroad, including in China, and then either by accident or worse, that leaked from a lab and created the pandemic of a century. And you wonder why Americans mistrust science or scientific elites? They have given you no reason to trust anything that they say. The possible responsible parties, in part, for the origin of a global pandemic, the greatest pandemic of a century, going about lying about it for the course of the last year, now say wear masks and wear vaccines, have given the public no reason to actually trust them. And to me, I'm speaking as I studied molecular biology at Harvard. I care about the pursuit of science. I care about the pursuit of truth. I care about public trust in science. And we have a crisis of public trust in science. But the reason why isn't because ordinary people are too stupid to know that they should trust science. It is because the scientific elites in this country, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, has given the public absolutely no reason to trust them at all.
Just allow me, Kennedy, I want to double down something. something with Vivek. You know, as I've been talking with nurses and doctors, 40% of whom in the city where we are now in New York City, reportedly 30 to 40% now, maybe the number's changing a bit, are not vaccinated. And it's for some of the reasons why you're talking. They don't trust the science-based medical industry that they live in because they have seen so many different things.
Look, I've lived in elite America, including among scientific elites, and nothing annoys me more right now than the scorn for the people who are skeptical of getting the vaccine, or the scorn for the people who are skeptical of the advice that they get, without looking in the mirror and asking themselves what role they played in fueling that crisis of institutional mistrust. And I think they ought to look in the mirror first for deciding where that originated.
That's really interesting. And by the way, you've given us a way to get at it then. We can talk about it. If they don't trust scientists, which is what you're saying, maybe you're right. Maybe we better take a look at why that is. Kennedy?
Yeah, you don't have to follow the science here. You can follow the money in the paper trail.
Wow.
As Vivek laid out, and there is a lot of accountability still to be met by Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci, because they had a big hand in this, and they were the ones who were able to give the up or down vote almost single-handedly and behind closed doors to these research grants. And they were the ones who changed the structure so it would be easier to get that money out of the country and to institutions that were doing gain-of-function research. Now, the idea that the science is settled, that is very anti-science. In fact, there were a lot of researchers who didn't like the idea of publishing gain-of-function research to begin with, because they thought it was a blueprint for bioterrorism that was being published. So when all of this emerged and scientists from the Wuhan lab started dying, I'm sure that Drs. Collins and Fauci had a very audible gulp, because they knew that the genie was out of the bottle. And instead of trying to figure out how to keep the other genies back in, they're busy being scolds and finger wagging, and people who are going to college football games who, after a year and a half, they can do their own cost-benefit analysis and make their own decisions as to whether or not they're comfortable being outdoors with a group of people.
Real quickly, Kaylee, you know, this is not about whether or not we can prevent this in the future as much as it is how do we get out of this right now. And what Vivek has given us is a way to talk about this. It's not that people necessarily don't trust science, but if it's the human beings that are peddling the information which is supposed to motivate or dictate our movement, that's what they don't. Well, that's incredibly powerful information.
It is, and people are opposed to authoritarian dictates. So someone who's hesitant about the vaccine, if you oppose an authoritarian dictate, like you must show a card to eat at a restaurant, you're going to have the opposite of the intended effect.
So what do you do?
What do? You start allowing people freedom, put forward the science, the information about the vaccine. We've all had a discussion about it. I had the vaccine. I believe in the science behind it.
All of
Give
us.
people the choice, show people the science, but don't oppose Orwellian mandates, because that just backfires, and I think that's what we're seeing.
It's interesting. Vivek, you're brilliant. I did not know Vivek was like all up in that in Ivy League microbiology.
Prior life. Yeah.
Well, it's good for this one.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.